Hello, my name's Anne Birch, and I'd like to welcome you to my 10-minute podcast, especially curated for women in public service. I'll be interviewing women who can inspire, help, and definitely encourage you to build your resilience and determination. Details of the contributors and resources mentioned will be in the notes accompanying this podcast on my website. Today's guest is Isi Dixon, and she's a productivity expert. She's agreed to the challenge of putting into practice all of her knowledge and expertise by sharing her top tips for being productive in under 10 minutes. Izzy, welcome.
Hi, Anne. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, I know from practical experience that your down to earth approach actually can help you become more productive. And whatever your situation, it really does work. But before you give us your top tips, I'm curious to know how you came into this business. I'm assuming you're one of those naturally organized people who has lots of lists and is always on top of things.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? um, as it happens, I used to be one of the most disorganized people you've probably ever met. I used to be always late. I'm a master procrastinator, so I know exactly what that feels like. Um, Naturally lazy. My mum will attest to that. So I'm pretty much predisposed to doing all the wrong things. And I eventually decided, wait a minute, there must be a better way. I can't keep going like this, especially sort of once I reached adulthood and once I realized there are people out there who are actually really good at this stuff. And I want to be like that. I simply changed what I do from the inside out. And I found out everything I could about time management and productivity and habits and overcoming procrastination and all the good stuff. So I had to learn it the hard way. But that way, I learned what works, what doesn't work for me, that everybody's different, that some things work for some people, some things don't work for some people, some work for others. So I realized quite quickly it's a very personal thing. And that got me interested in sharing that with others. And whoever I helped, just sort of as a friend, they always said, "Oh my God, you should do this professionally because you're really good at this stuff." That's how it started.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's so reassuring. And I think you're right. That whole business of learning for yourself gives a real, well, you've tested it. You've tested this stuff, right? And
Yeah.
it's worked for you. So as you say, lots of people listening will have different ways of doing things already and think that they are doing the best they can. But, there's always things we can learn. And that's what you're going to be sharing with us. So let's get straight to it. What are your 3 top tips for the listeners that if they adopt them, will make them more productive, less stressed, and most importantly, give them time back for themselves?
Okay, so yeah, it's always tricky to find sort of the three top because there's just so many. But I've decided to give you three, um, so two smaller tips and one larger one. So the two smaller ones you can implement straight away. Number one is turn off all notifications. Whether that is on your phone, whether that is on your computer, doesn't matter. Simply turn them off. And that is no more Facebook updates pinging in, no more Instagram, Twitter, all of the social medias, turn them off. You don't need to know when somebody posts something, when somebody comments. You can do that when you take a break and want to see what's been happening, but you don't need it interrupting your workflow. The same with emails. You don't need to know every time a new email pops in. It could be a newsletter. It could be a request. It could be something important, but most likely it is simply something that can wait until you're done with the thing that you're trying to concentrate on, with the thing you're focusing on. Um, so that is tip number one, turn off all notifications. It really takes away your focus and it it does nothing to help your productivity to have those notifications popping in. Um, it's it's you letting technology control your day rather than you controlling your day. That's what's happening. You need to be in charge of your time as much as you possibly can. So that's number one. Number two is um, when you book meetings, especially if you're in charge of booking the meetings, make sure that you have um, gaps between them. Don't go from one Zoom call to another. So you log off from one and immediately the next one comes in. Make sure you have 5 or 10 minutes in between so you can get yourself a drink, get up for a second, put your mind just into the next call rather than still being in the old one. You might want to send an email as a result of the previous call, so you have time to do that. You might just need a comfort break. I mean, for goodness
Yeah.
sake, we need those. Um, you might just need to look at some notes for the next meeting. Just give your brain that little bit of a break, that mini downtime. It'll help you be just less stressed out throughout the day. You know, Zoom fatigue and all of that, burnout, all of those things happen because we go from one to the next to the next to the next, 4 or 5 meetings in a row or even more, and never have time to actually just breathe. Literally, just take a breath and
Mm.
what's next? What have I just done? Okay, that's done with. Next thing. So just little mini breaks. They don't have to be long, like I said, 5 or 10 minutes, absolutely fine. Maybe the meeting doesn't need to be an hour, 50 minutes is fine. And then you almost built in a little break before the next meeting. There are ways to do that. That's tip number two, breaks in between meetings, especially in between Zoom meetings. Tip number three is the big one, which is have a think about time blocking. Now, what I mean by that is we all have different things that we do throughout the day. So that could be um, all your emails, phone calls, um, working on a project, creating material for either a presentation or blog posts or whatever else you need to create. Um, Create time blocks for each of them. So you know what your categories are.
Mhm.
Um, Ideally, if you can, do like a time audit for a week. What do you spend your time on every week?
Oh.
How much time do you spend on emails? How much time do you spend on phone calls? All the other stuff I mentioned, and whatever your categories are. And then create maybe, I don't know, a block of time where for an hour you concentrate on one thing only. You get all your phone calls out of the way, you get all your emails out of the way. You have an hour where you focus on your content creation, your presentation creation. Apologies for the rhymes here. Um, so that you can really use your mind at its best possible levels because you're focusing. And while you also have everything turned off, you have no notifications running, you will then actually be able to focus on the thing that you need to get done, the high priority stuff, the high level stuff, the
Mm.
strategizing, the planning, because you can focus, because you have got nothing pinging in all the time. Once you've done your big item stuff, then take maybe again about 20 minutes or so, where you then respond to some emails, respond to some phone calls. Um, but the good stuff has been done. You've
Mm.
taken that time to actually work on that. That was tip number three. So
Oh, that's
just to
great.
sum them up again, turn off
Yes.
notifications, breaks between meetings, especially between Zoom meetings, and try out time blocking. Maybe.
Wow, that's amazing. I really do appreciate that, because what comes to mind for me is that it's almost like an ebb and flow, that by just putting those three tips into practice, you're you're managing your energy as well as everything you've got to get done, so that you're making
Absolutely.
sure you're at optimum energy, whatever that might look like for you, during the day for the important things, rather than just getting drained by the emails or the interruptions or whatever. So that is
Yeah.
just, that's fantastic. Thank you. And I suppose for me, what also comes to mind is it's about setting that intention, isn't it? That it doesn't matter what you decide to do, if it's one of those three tips, two, or all three, you have to decide to do it regularly,
Yeah.
because we know from the research that it can take about 3 months for changes in our routine to become habits that then just become the way we do things and
Yeah.
help us to maintain that productivity. But at the moment, we all have bad days, and until that becomes a habit, the diary goes out the window, the internet goes up the creek, you're late for a Zoom meeting, everything just seems to be going wrong. You have one of those days. What How do you remain productive on those days?
Um, I think the first thing is realizing that you're having one of those days,
Yeah.
because it's only then that you can do something about it. If you're in the trenches and you're in the middle of it, and it's just one thing after another, it's really difficult to come up for air. But as soon as you realize you are having one of those days where simply everything goes wrong, and we all have them,
Yeah.
my recommendation is do not try and power through at all cost, because again, that'll just drain you no end, because you're almost fighting against the current. What I do on those days is I simply take myself away for half an hour or so, sometimes longer, however long I feel I need. Just go for a walk. We're allowed to go for a walk. Let's
Hmm.
do that.
Yeah.
Just get out the house for half an hour, go for a walk, do something different. If you're into art, do that, do some drawing or listening to some music. If you prefer that rather than going for a walk, just forget about it just for about half an hour or so. And then when you come back to it, then things will be easier. Somehow magically, I don't know how it works, but it does. It's because we're not forcing it. And
Mm.
if you're not forcing it, things will then just work a little bit better. If the internet is up the creek,
Yeah.
make the most of it and have a cup.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. I mean, if we can't work, we can't work. There's nothing we can do about it. Once
Yeah.
it comes back, we'll be fine.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we'll get back to it.
Thank you so much, Izzy. I could almost feel myself relaxing. It's that old saying of it, just breathe.
Yes, breathe.
If everything's going, if there's chaos around you, if you can only remember to breathe, it's a similar thing. If everything's gone wrong, take out half an hour. It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But I get where you're coming from with that, because you're taking a proper break, and it can't possibly be any worse than what you're dealing with, and it will help you reframe and refocus, and think about, okay, let's just put this in perspective, shall we? It'll still be there when I go back, but I'm going to be in a much better place to be able to deal with it, because these things are easier said than done. It's
I
tough,
know.
isn't it? But it really resonated with me, because I could all, as I say, as you were speaking, I was almost relaxing and thinking, oh, it's okay to do this. So hopefully listeners will feel the same. But Izzy, thank you so much for sharing your story and your tips with me today.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you, listeners and watchers of this series. All the details of how you can contact Izzy and other guests in this Stress to Strength series and the notes are on my website, www.afbcoachingandconsultancy.co.uk. If you've liked what you've heard, rate and review us with your preferred provider, and come back next time for another podcast going from stress to strength with Anne Birch.